YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back. There are 9 NFL head coaching job openings across the league. I'm here to predict all 9 of them. I'll give my prediction and a couple other options for these teams as well. So some teams a little more predictable since they're narrowing down their finalists than compared to others who have a long list still. So excited to see who these teams hire. We're constantly predicting, talking about these things on updates on Twitter, along with everything NFL, so check it out there. We have full NFL content here, coverage. We got offseason playoff. I can't wait for the offseason. It's my favorite time of the year. If my team was in the Super Bowl, that'd probably be my favorite time of the year, but they're not. They're not even close. So offseason with free agency, we get free agency grades, predictions out there, draft content. We got you covered. So join us for all of that. Be much appreciated. Again, important links pinned in the comments there down below. Here's our Twitter. Pretty important stuff. Updates on here. Dan Desp wanted a shout out for recommending this video. I mean, I was doing this video anyways, but we'll give it to him, so shout out to him there. And yeah, always talking with you guys, taking ideas, anything. So it's a good reason to follow us on Twitter. The Jacksonville Jaguars prediction. BYRON LEFTWICH is what I'm going with. Follow us on Twitter. I kind of been the 3 names you see on your screen. We kind of been discussing those guys at the top there. As soon as the Jags, they interviewed Jim Caldwell and heard rave reports about that interview. So I'm like, we know Jim Caldwell's, maybe at the top of that list. And then Matt Eberflus, the defensive coordinator of the Colts, was the first coach to get a second interview with the Jags. So we're kind of feeling him. BYRON LEFTWICH ends up getting a second interview. So right now it really feels like between LEFTWICH and Eberflus. I'm going to be pretty surprised if it's not one of those two. So the Jaguars is one I don't know if it's been said that those are the only 2. I think somebody else can pop up, but I'm saying I might be a little surprised if it's not one of those 2. If it's not the wild card, Jim Caldwell, if it's somebody other than the 3 on your screen, I'm going to be shocked, absolutely shocked. So really it feels like between LEFTWICH and Eberflus right now. We know the Bears are in on a guy like Eberflus. We'll talk about the Bears. We're talking about every team that needs a head coach. The Bears are also in a guy like Caldwell. So are these teams waiting to see who these guys choose or what's going on here? I feel like it's going to be LEFTWICH, though. It just makes a little bit more sense. Eberflus, if he comes in, it's going to change the defense a bit. And they kind of started to build that defense last year. Your prized possession, your franchise piece is Trevor Lawrence. So you want somebody to come in and help him grow. You want that to be your big piece. You want him to succeed. So, just thinking about between which of those 2 guys makes sense, it's more so LEFTWICH for those reasons. It felt like they were going to go Eberflus, but I'm kind of predicting on what makes a little bit more sense here. And so I'm predicting BYRON LEFTWICH. Yeah, I guess now these are predictions. What hires do I actually like and dislike? And we'll grade these after the hirings are done here. But I don't mind LEFTWICH. I prefer that over a Jim Caldwell, over a recycled coach, a guy who kind of didn't really work out before. Is he magically going to work out? I definitely prefer LEFTWICH over that. And it makes sense with Trevor Lawrence. They got some more work to do, but yeah, it's a little bit of a shot in the dark, a little bit, because how involved was he with the Buccaneers? Because Tom Brady, their quarterback, was a pretty big piece of changing plays the line, changing things within the playbook probably. And then you have Arians and you have LEFTWICH there as well. So how involved was he? And that team was going to live or die based on their talent, really, was first. So how much impact did the assistant coach have? So it is a little bit of a shot in the dark. It's almost like all GM hires are shots in the dark because those guys weren't drafting or signing guys. It's a little bit of a mystery. So it is a little bit like that. But he played in the NFL. He's a quarterback. He's got experience with the Bruce Arians, Tom Brady, the Buccaneers winning a championship. So that's good. So that'll be my prediction here, but you see my next guess, my wild card. We'll go over that for every team. Broncos, I'm sticking with this is actually getting interesting now, but I'm sticking with my original pick. Follow us on Twitter. I was talking about Dan Quinn before they even scheduled an interview. I actually said, watch out for Dan Quinn and Nathaniel Hackett. for the Broncos to be interested in him before there was even a peep about an interview coming up, and everyone's like, "Who's your source? Who's your source?" I'm just predicting it, and it ended up being the case there. And I was predicting at that time that Dan Quinn will probably end up their head coach. So I'm going to stick with my original prediction, but things are getting interesting. And you see the three names on your screen. Go down to Kevin O'Connell, who's coming, the offense coordinator from the Rams, coming from LA, who's still alive, obviously. That's really not a wild card. But the reason he's on there is because there are three finals for the Broncos. So it was absolutely pointless to put anybody else's name up here. But Dan Quinn has a relationship with George Payton. He seems to be the hottest candidate. Every team seems to want him. He's at the top or very near the top and I wouldn't agree with that. If I made the candidates list, I would not have Dan Quinn at the top. Not that I think it's a bad option. But other teams want him, and the Broncos do seem like maybe the most appealing landing spot, in my opinion. And we'll see what Dan Quinn ultimately chooses because he's got some interest from the Bears, the Vikings, the Giants, other teams, But I think the Broncos land the guy that they kind of wanted the whole time. I think they'll be hesitant to change their mind, but it feels like they're getting a little close to changing their mind. If they end up with Nathaniel Hackett or Kevin O'Connell, my take is going to be, people will disagree, but my take, and I'll be firm on this, is their original choice was Dan Quinn, and they either changed their minds or he chose another team. So that'll be my take if they don't get Dan Quinn. They all of a sudden change their mind to somebody else, or Dan Quinn chose somebody else instead. That'll be my take. So it's kind of two takes. It's one of the two, and I'm pretty damn firm on that. But I'm sticking with my original prediction. I think they go Dan Quinn. Again, I keep saying it's kind of getting interesting now. Nathaniel Hackett, it was actually last night. He had, I think I saw it was like an 8-hour meeting / interview / dinner with the Broncos GM George Payton. So that's interesting. That's definitely interesting. Nathaniel Hackett's definitely maybe a risky one because he wasn't really calling plays in Green Bay, but he has that connection with Rodgers, and everyone's linking the Broncos to Rodgers. I think that's just kind of speculation, just rumors right now. It's just because they need a quarterback and they have a lot of cap space and they have trade ammo. So it does make sense for those reasons, So at least they have that going for them. There's people that throw out rumors where it doesn't really make sense. If they have the cap space, what are they going to trade? It doesn't really make sense right off the bat. At least it makes sense right off the bat for the Broncos. I just wouldn't. People are getting a little too confident right now with that. But if you get a guy like Nathaniel Hackett, maybe that's a little more appealing to a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Maybe Dan Quinn seems to be pretty respected. So maybe he's appealing too. It's kind of a guess at this point. So Nathaniel Hackett would be my next guess. Again, that's starting to look interesting because, he had that 8-hour conversation with George Payton. Interesting. Wild card Kevin O'Connell. I mean, what the Rams are doing is probably boosting his stock. The young coaches are working. The non-recycled coaches, guys that have failed elsewhere, those guys aren't working. So maybe you go the young route. The game's changing. The era's changing. The play calling, everyone's sticking to almost like a play calling for dummies book, it's sticking to like a script, and that's what's failing right now. So getting a young guy with, that has that experience with the Rams, it looks pretty good. So Kevin O'Connell's kind of a sneaky one. I honestly, out of these three, I would probably lean Kevin O'Connell, just because Quinn didn't work out elsewhere. I know he went to a Super Bowl, going to the Super Bowl, winning a Super Bowl, two totally different things, but at least he didn't really fail. He didn't really technically fail with the Falcons. It just didn't really work out. Another thing is his defense was going downhill in Atlanta. It seems like when he's purely focused on defense, being the defense coordinator, it's a little better. He's a good defensive coach, understands talent, but his defense is a little predictable, though, and that kind of hurt the Cowboys a little bit down the stretch. Kind of relying on the players like Mike Parsons there, but I'd like Kevin O'Connell, and having a young coach, I think that could appeal to Aaron Rodgers, believe it or not. I think Aaron Rodgers, knowing he can have pretty big input on plays and him deciding things at the line, I think that'd be pretty good. Maybe that's the same case with Hackett, but O'Connell will be the wild card. I'm sticking to my original prediction with Dan Quinn, but Dan Quinn can ultimately decide, I'd rather take the Bears job. I'd rather take the Vikings job. I'd rather take the Giants. I'm probably looking more at the Bears-Vikings there. It's pretty possible. I'm going to stick with my original prediction. I keep saying that, but I'm going to do it. So to the Bears. Tough one because I'm back and forth, and I have been, if you follow us on Twitter, throughout this entire process. back and forth between Caldwell and Eberflus. So I've been predicting those guys. I've changed my pick a little bit, but it's been the same guys the whole way, and even before anything became serious. So I feel pretty good about what I was saying originally about them. And Dan Quinn, it sounds like they really like it. A lot of teams have him at the top, so they could end up with Dan Quinn if he just chooses the Bears over the Broncos. I still feel like the Broncos might be his first choice, but it is interesting that he's taking more interviews after the Broncos. If the Broncos were his first choice, why would he be doing that? So that's what makes it interesting. So Dan Quinn is the wild card. I was thinking Brian Flores for a wild card because he has a connection to Ryan Poles, our new GM. Brian Flores, that is. So maybe a deeper wild card there. But this whole way I've been back and forth between Jim Caldwell and Matt Eberflus. I predicted Eberflus first. Then I'm going towards Caldwell. It's an interesting situation in Chicago because they bring in Bill Polian to be kind of a consultant. That's the first thing they do on the GM and the coach search. And he has a connection with Jim Caldwell. Now Eberflus is coaching with the Colts, and Polian has the connection with the Colts. And so does Caldwell, actually. But Caldwell actually has that direct connection with Bill Polian. So it's pretty clear to me that Bill Polian is picking Jim Caldwell, but it's a consultant. It's an outside guy they're bringing in just for this job. So since Bill Polian's not part of the organization, how much does that say? I've heard that within the Bears organization and Polian, they have different opinions. So maybe the guys with McCaskey, maybe they're more sore towards Eberflus. Maybe they all have Dan Quinn at the top. I think most teams do. So it is a little bit tricky here. But Ryan Poles gets hired yesterday, so maybe he'll be the deciding factor on the tiebreaker maybe. So that's why it's still not determined in the Bears organization on what they will do. I keep hearing Jim Caldwell had a pretty good interview, and then Poles got to sit down with him as well. He'll sit down with these other two listed today, actually later today, so maybe we'll hear more. Maybe I'll change my prediction based off that. I don't think so. But I'm still leaning towards Caldwell, getting more of that leader type in there. Eberflus more of the defensive guy, which the Bears have gone with in the past. We saw, last was Nagy, and that didn't work out, but in terms of focusing on the defense, and then they want to go away from that. They've been focusing first priority is the defense, even though they had an offensive coach. So if they get a defensive coach, I guess I can argue either side with that. If they get a defensive coach, maybe they don't have to focus on the defense because they got a good defensive coach in there. So I guess I can argue myself on that one a little bit. So that'll be pretty interesting to what they do there. But what they should do, I'm not a big fan of the coaches that failed elsewhere, so I wouldn't go Jim Caldwell. I like Eberflus. I do. It wouldn't be my first choice, but out of these choices, maybe that's probably the route I would go. So we'll see what they end up doing here. But I'm going to predict Caldwell. But again, it really feels like a tight battle between. And again, Dan Quinn is in that mix too, but really between Caldwell and Eberflus, in my opinion. So would not shock me if they went Eberflus. It would shock me if it was. It would surprise me a little bit if it wasn't one of those first two. Maybe a little bit there. To the Texans, I'm predicting Jonathan Gannon. I've kind of been predicting that for a little bit here. But yeah, I'm going to predict Jonathan Gannon, the defense coordinator from the Eagles, which is a little bit of a surprise guy on how, I don't want to say he's a hot name, but a little bit hotter than maybe what we would have predicted there, obviously. And then Josh McCown, who they're in on as well. And I'm going to go wild card. I was going to go Brian Flores because right off the bat, it felt like that's who they were going to go with. There was a connection there. That's what it felt like. So I was going to put, and that kind of went away, but I was going to put Flores in the wild card, but I'm going to go Kevin O'Connell. I really think they want a young coach. And maybe Flores, maybe the Texans didn't appeal to Flores. Maybe the Texans just want a younger guy I think they want a guy that they kind of can control a little bit. I really do, which isn't appealing to some of the veteran coaches like the Flores. We heard about Casiro in the ear of Culley during the year. It's not the best look, really, but so they want kind of one of the younger routes, and it really feels like Gannon or McCown. And it reported that they were very high. It was been reported that they were very high on McCown, at first. And there was a report that they want other teams to be interested in him to kind of justify them hiring McCown. It sounded a little ridiculous to me. I don't know if I was really buying it. But then it was kind of interesting that they were very high on Gannon, and all of a sudden Gannon's all of a sudden kind of a big name for other teams. It's like, there's something a little fishy going on here. So, and then Gannon's a candidate. And yeah, all of a sudden he was like high on the Broncos, people were saying, but then they narrowed it down to 3 finalists, and he wasn't one of the finalists. So I found that a little interesting. I think it's really the Texans, and then maybe there's another team we'll talk about that might like Gannon, but it really feels like they're leaning towards Gannon. McCown, they interviewed last year, and they didn't hire. They didn't hire. So that's why it'd be weird if they hired him this year. It's a possibility. It's my next guess. If they didn't go Gannon, I'm kind of counting on it to be McCown. But it's a little odd, though, at the same time, if they hire McCown. Like, why didn't they hire him this year? What changed a year later from Coley to McCown? It's a little interesting. And again, I think they kind of want that young route that they kind of can control a little bit, and O'Connell's a great option. And out of these 3, probably the option I would go with, if I'm being honest. But Gannon, I've heard good things from interview. It's my problem. I think at this time of the year, I think guys that have a good interview, I think it's a little overrated. Obviously, you have to have a good interview. Obviously, you have to present yourself as a leader. That's obviously a good thing. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Definitely not saying it at all. But I think teams, maybe they go a little bit too much off, what they said in the interview and how their voice is, in the interview, and how good they were there. You want to win football games. Get the best guy that can win you football games. And I think number one shouldn't really be the interview. Of course, the interview has to be good. Number one is what they present on the field. And, of course, Gannon's a pretty good defensive mind. Heard good things about him coaching, defense. I thought he elevated the Eagles' defense this year. It didn't look so hot when they had to game plan properly for the Buccaneers in the playoffs. It didn't really look good. Looked a little bit messy there. But he did elevate the Eagles' defense. They played pretty good in the regular season. And he can coach a defense. He can call a defense. My one problem about his defense, it's a little bit of a bland defense is the best way to describe it. Not too much blitzing. It's a lot of just cover 2. You try to make it as balanced as possible. It's not that takeover defense. It could be a pretty good balanced defense, which is good for the regular season. But he is a smart guy, so I'm not taking that away from him. So he's not at the top of my list of the candidates that I would hire, is basically what I'm saying. But I'm hearing good things. So maybe he's kind of rising up my list, my rankings list, I suppose, a little bit. I think that's what the Texans go with. I'm actually expecting that one. I know people are still predicting McCown. And maybe since Flores was the one right off the bat, Mayo was kind of in there as well. So maybe they're still predicting that as well. I'm kind of leaning towards Gannon. Again, McCown would be a little weird because it's like, why didn't you just hire him last year? What changed in a year? But I can still see it. It's the Texans. Dolphins. I've talked about this. It is Dolphins versus Giants for Brian Daboll. Now, my first wave of predictions, long before the Giants hired a GM even, which definitely changed things for me. Long before that, I was predicting Daboll to the Dolphins. I was really feeling that, and I was actually not expecting to change it. But the Giants then hire Shane for the GM from the Bills, Joe Shane, and right away they interview Brian Daboll. Right away. And it's like, and they already scheduled a second interview, and I'm like, all right, I'm feeling Giants getting Daboll now. They got a pretty good roster over there. They just need a quarterback, and they need a offensive line. So maybe that's appealing. So I know I've changed my pick, but I've been in this. I've been with the same guys here for the Dolphins and the Giants for the most part. And now, if I did this video at this time yesterday, I would have had Daboll with the Giants. And now 24 hours later, I'm leaning towards, and it's 50-50. We'll talk about the Giants right after this. I'm leaning towards Daboll, and we haven't heard anything from the Dolphins. It's weird. They're keeping it quiet over there. But I'm leaning Daboll to the Dolphins. And it's Dolphins versus Giants. The Dolphins have the cap space. The Giants have the draft picks. Not the best cap space. They have the 2 first-round draft picks. Dolphins have Tua. Now, where do you put that? Well, Daboll coached Tua at Alabama, so you think that'd be a little more appealing. I think the thing that's not that appealing, if I was a coach candidate, I can't really speak for a guy like Brian Daboll or anybody else, that's not that appealing is Chris Greer coming off a little bit control, like he's got too much control and power over there. Kind of what he says goes. That's kind of the vibes I'm getting. Now, I'm not saying, everyone else thinks that, so maybe that'd be a reason that Daboll choose the Giants. Maybe money. Maybe money is the reason. I don't know how much these guys are getting offered. I don't think anybody does. I'm leaning towards this route. The Dolphins have stayed pretty quiet. and it was a little clear right off the bat when it wasn't too quiet that, they like DABOLL, they like, Vance Joseph. Unfortunately, for their sake, they like Mike McDaniel, but it felt like DABOLL was at the top of their list, and then everything went quiet. So that kind of, maybe they know they're getting their guy. They're letting it kind of play out a little bit. But it's kind of 50-50 Dolphins versus Giants there. My next guest would be Vance Joseph. They're linked to them. He has a connection with Greer. That would not be a good hire. I think what the Cardinals showed defensively down the stretch of the season in the playoff game sure didn't help him. I still think he's a good defensive mind. I think he's a step under Brian Flores in terms of a defensive mind. And I think he's a massive step under Brian Flores in terms of a head coach. That's kind of been proven. There's coaches that failed elsewhere. And it's like, well, maybe he just needs a different team and then he got some experience as an assistant coach, and that's good. And I don't really agree with that. But you kind of look back to some of the guys that were sloppy in their outing as head coach, and I think Vance Joseph, it felt a little messy. So I would not – this would be my least favorite hire out of anything. So wild card Mike McDaniel doesn't really feel like that big-time leader type, but he can be. He could be a sneaky good leader there. People just don't realize it. Kind of just judging by looking at the guy's face and hearing his voice, But he's a smart dude. Smart dude coming from that 49ers tree. I'm surprised that he is not getting more looks from other teams. I mean, it'd be pretty wild if a team pulled him from 49ers offense coordinator to their offense coordinator. Now, why would that happen? It's because Shanahan's calling plays in San Francisco. Maybe he wants to call plays. So, pretty interesting. But I'm back to predicting my original prediction, Brian Daboll to the Dolphins. Again, it's a prediction, but I'm kind of 50-50, 51-49 Dolphins over Giants. Very interesting there. Does it play a part that he has to play the Bills twice a year? Does that play a part? So, we will see. To the Giants. So, speaking of the Dolphins, who they're battling for Daboll, I got the Giants landing the Dolphins' former coach here, Brian Flores, who they've done a little bit of work on. And I think that could be the route they go here. They get the defensive-minded coach. I think he's got a pretty specific scheme where it's a unique scheme. You have to have the right players. You have to have good corners. You have to have good defensive line here, guys that can play. I think the Giants kind of have those players. They got a pretty good defensive paper to kind of fit that. So I think they'll like his leadership. I think he's a strong leader, kind of a guy that doesn't take no shit. That's kind of what I like about Brian Flores. So I kind of like him as a candidate here. And I think he'll like their defense. Why I again, like I said, I'm about 50-50 between the Dolphins and the Giants landing Brian Daboll, and why I can convince myself back and forth all day. And in a big one right now that I can change, where I can kind of convince myself to change Daboll to the Giants is, well, not only the obvious that they got a Bills guy for the GM and, this and that, and maybe they get the 2 draft picks and pretty good roster, makes it more appealing. Not the obvious, but they're talking about, currently that they want to try to build around Daniel Jones. Now, I'm not saying that's one, guys come out and say that all the time, and everyone thinks, well, they're wrong because they said that they're 100% not taking a quarterback, and it's not really the case. It could be smoke, it could be anything. They're doing their homework on quarterbacks, but because they said that, I think it means a little something that would be their best scenario, maybe, or their ideal scenario right now. So if that is really the case, that they really want Daniel Jones to work still, they're still insisting on him. Let's say that's the case. Let's say that they're 100% and they're telling the truth. I don't know if Flores is the guy. I think Daboll's more of the guy because a guy that can make that work, an offensive guy that can make that work and trust that he can make that work. And Daniel Jones is, I don't even have to say this, but he's nowhere near Josh Allen. Nowhere near. And I shouldn't have to say that. But in terms of play style, there are actually some similarities. I mean, Daniel Jones got to cut it out turnovers, and usually at this point in their career, you can't really cut it out turnovers. So that's my problem with Daniel Jones, but that's a little off topic, but with that being said, maybe Daboll likes Daniel Jones. Maybe think he figured out. Flores kind of wanted a different quarterback from Tua, it sounds like, so it could be pretty easy for him to go away from Daniel Jones. So that'd be the argument against this. I just don't think people will think so. People think this every year, but they're wrong. They are not locked into Daniel Jones. It doesn't mean they're not locked into him, but it doesn't mean they are locked into him. They're going to do their homework on other quarterbacks. So right now, again, 50-50. Got Brian Flores. It's hard to see Brian Flores not get the job, but it's actually possible that he doesn't. Next guest, of course, will be Brian Daboll, because I think it's 50-50. Something that kind of changed my mind. Why? Like I said when I was talking about the Dolphins 24 hours ago, if I would have made this video, I would have gave Daboll to the Giants. Why? What's a big reason I swapped a little bit? Start to feel like since the Dolphins are staying quiet, start to kind of go back to my original prediction. I'm a big fan of kind of going back to my original prediction sometimes. But a bigger one is Daboll left a second interview without a deal, which doesn't mean much. We've seen it happen to other teams. We see it happen in the past where they leave and they come back, get the deal, come back for a third time. We've seen it. But he left, and they're lining up these other interviews. Brian Flores, I believe. Leslie Frazier's another one, another Bills guy. So we see the Bills connection as well there, obviously. So that's a reason as well why I kind of went away from it. And ultimately, I think Brian Daboll could have his choice between the Giants and the Dolphins, like I've been saying. But wild card's Leslie Frazier, which for their case, Leslie Frazier's a likable guy. He knows defense. He kind of let his team down in the – well, no, not just him. The players got to play better too. But in that divisional round game against the Chiefs, he did not coach a good game in that one. He's a good defensive mind overall. He had his chance at a head coaching job. It just he didn't give me head coach vibes on top of it not working out at the same time. So I wouldn't love that hire. The Giants are in a pretty good situation, at least from what I'm guessing here, because I would like Daboll or Flores. I would like both. I'd like both for them, actually a lot. So I think they're in a pretty good situation, actually, as long as I go Leslie Frazier there. Next up, the Saints. I think this one's pretty straightforward, even though this is weird because they just Sean Payton just stepped down yesterday, and all these teams been looking for head coaches, and this one seems to be the easiest. That could just blow up my face. We'll see. But I'm going to go with Dennis Allen, their defensive coordinator. He stepped up when Sean Payton had to miss a game this year. He's a good coach. He's definitely a good defensive coach. He's got the chemistry, the connection with the Saints already. He drew some interest elsewhere. But yeah, I think he's supposed to meet with the Bears, if I'm not mistaken. But I didn't know it was supposed to happen already, so maybe they can reschedule. But I just, again, another reason why, he wants to stay in New Orleans and they want him there. Next guest, it's almost weird putting Aaron Glenn on here in general, who was the DB coach for the Saints 2 years ago, and this past year is the defense coordinator for the Lions, and it already kind of came out that they're interested in Dennis Allen and their former guy, Aaron Glenn. But why I say Aaron Glenn's more of a wild card, because it wouldn't make a lot of sense to me, really, because would you pass up on going your guy, Dennis Allen, your defense coordinator, to go for a guy that was you let leave, who was your secondary coach? It seems a little odd, So I think the only way that could happen is if Dennis Allen goes elsewhere, which I don't really think's the case. So, and then throw an outside name in there. I wanted to think of an outside name for a wild card, even though I think Aaron Glenn's kind of a wild card for the reasons I explained. I thought of Jim Caldwell. Again, it's a wild card. I originally thought of Doug Peterson. I could see Doug Peterson, a veteran guy that won a Super Bowl, fitting with the Saints. I could see that, but he took a year off last year. He supposedly drew interest, and he just felt like, take a year off and see if I get a job. I think you would just rather do that again, because what's the Saints situation? Sean Payton's they're not saying he's retiring. You're saying he's stepping down for now. He could come back, and then, I don't know. It's a little bit odd situation. So I don't know if Doug Peterson, that would appeal to him a whole lot. And I don't know if the Saints would have him at the top over Dennis Allen anyways. I don't think so. Really don't think so. So the wild card coach on the outside here, I came up with Jim Caldwell. I don't think they would go for a young project guy. Jim Caldwell, kind of a veteran coach that just wants a job again. Plain and simple. He wants a job again. And maybe he isn't looking for maybe a lengthy, doesn't need a lengthy opportunity here. Just wants to coach again for right now. So that kind of made sense to me as a wild card. But again, I'm feeling pretty good about Dennis Allen there, as probably everybody out there. To the Vikings, which is a tough one. It's my own team, and I can't figure them out right now. And they just hired their GM today, so maybe things will start to fall in place a little bit. But there's a long list of guys I can talk about. I'm going to go DEMECO Ryans. They already interviewed him. He actually has a connection to their GM they hired today. They could go that young route. And I think and after they interviewed him, he's put on some really good performances in the playoffs. Here's the key. He went and played the Vikings rival, the Packers, the team that they can't beat in the division race here. And they can beat them in games, but they can't beat them out for the division NFC North division title. He just had a masterful game called game against the Packers, and he's done it. And he's gotten this team better every step of the way. And I've noticed that he's kind of hid the fact that the 49ers are a little weaker at corner. They're making everything else to star players around that thrive and hide that fact. And the Vikings have had a kind of a struggle here recently with corners. So, and they've got stud players elsewhere. They got that safety in Harrison Smith. They got Eric Kendricks, the linebacker, which is very important to DEMECO Ryan's scheme. 49ers in general, that scheme. They have defensive linemen, especially the ones they added last year on top of, guys like Daniel Hunter, who they already had. So I think it makes sense as a fit here. I think they like the young route. It makes sense to me right now. The Vikings is still a little bit wide open, so it's not as a firm prediction as some of the other ones. But I'm thinking DEMECO Ryans here, especially with the display he's put on in the playoffs, and he's still going. Next guest would be Kevin O'Connell, who they interviewed. Again, I kind of get the feeling all of a sudden they want to go the younger route. So that's kind of where I went there more. And you got DEMECO Ryans, the young defensive route, Kevin O'Connell, the young offensive route. So I think it's kind of a feeling right now. That'd be my next guess. And wild card, I wanted to put multiple because again the Vikings are pretty wide open right now. It's kind of a mystery. So I could put Dan Quinn on the wild card too because it sounded like they had him at the top of their list. But is that still the case after they hire a GM? Is that still the case when it seems like the Broncos and the Bears are above them right now? It's a little bit out there. I heard they also have Todd Bowles very recently at the top of their list. They're very high on him, and that was the day of the Buccaneers playoff game. Right before that, I heard that. But then he had a pretty bad outing, a pretty bad outing the whole game, not just that last play. People talk about that last play. So does that change their opinion a little bit? And I throw Jonathan Gannon in there as well. Another young option was assistant coach for the Vikings in the past. Their players had good things to say about him as well. So that makes it seem like Jonathan Gannon. Maybe I should shoot him a little bit more up in the list. So right now, as you can tell, it's a little bit of a mystery. The Vikings, a long list of guys here. But I'm leaning towards DEMECO Ryans right now, those top two right now. But this is one. If I were to be wrong on somebody on this list, I'm probably be wrong on a couple because it's pretty hard to predict these things. But this would probably be one that I'm least confident on. Well, maybe not. Maybe the Raiders here. What's up with the Raiders? I'm sticking with Jim Harbaugh here. Long time ago, well, weeks ago, maybe over a month ago even, it came out that Jim Harbaugh was intrigued by the NFL. He might be wanting to come back. And I instantly said Raiders. I mentioned it in the video before anyone mentioned Jim Harbaugh, Raiders. I mentioned it, so I was kind of feeling it. So I'm going to stick with that. We just haven't heard anything about an interview, anything like that, right now. So that's what's making it pretty tough. It's making it pretty challenging, and they're interviewing other guys as well. And weird. Let me very bold of me. I have 3 guys listed here, and they have not interviewed. They have not interviewed yet. I have a feeling that the Raiders have not interviewed their guy yet, and they may have. I could be wrong. But Harbaugh, it's so quiet. You hear reports on it, too. The reports are saying, hearing nothing. Nobody knows anything about Jim Harbaugh. And that makes it interesting to me. That makes it seem like it might be Harbaugh coming to the Raiders. They're kind of just waiting it out a little bit. For that reason, I don't know what. But I think if Harbaugh was staying with Michigan, he'd be like, pound on the table, I'm staying with Michigan. This is my home. This is my place. You just kind of hear here and there that he's intrigued by the idea of the NFL. And then nobody knows anything. He's not saying anything anymore. That makes it sound like pretty wide open for what he may do here. And I've heard rumors about him in the Vikings too, but I'm thinking more so towards the Raiders. So I'm still predicting for those reasons. Next guest can be Matt Eberflus. Matt Eberflus could end up with the Bears. He could end up with the Jags. He's a hot candidate for both those. I'm predicting not, but they very well can. It's a high percentage that he could still end up, with one of those for a guy that I'm not predicting. But I watch out for him with the Raiders. The Raiders, again, I think they have a guy like Jim Harbaugh at the top of the list. Maybe a guy like Josh McDaniels from the Patriots towards the top of the list as well. But Harbaugh, very realistic. He wants to stay with Michigan. Josh McDaniels, who I have as a wild card because I think they like them. They're kind of connected to some GMs from the Patriots as well. But he very well could stay with the Patriots like he's done in the past. Maybe get the future head coaching job there. So who would be next on our list? Maybe some of the guys they're interviewing. Some of those guys aren't the most appealing guys here. I'd watch out for Matt Eberflus, who's interviewed well, seems like a strong leader, a very good defensive coach. But the Raiders are also interviewing Colts GM Ed Dodds, who has turned down interviews. He's pulled them himself out of, after interviews, out of being a candidate for teams this year and in the past. He has not pulled himself out of the Raiders yet. He's not taking his name out of that job yet. That's interesting. He has a connection with Eberflus. Eberflus was expected to get a job, and some people may. And I still think, even though I'm not predicting what the Bears, I talked about with the Bears or the Jags, he's very high up on them. It would not surprise me, and not even close to surprising me, if he got one of those jobs. But if he didn't, it'd be like, well, he was supposed to get a job. It's a pretty good candidate here. Let's interview him. Maybe they hire Dodds. I think that makes sense to me. I think at the top of our list is Harbaugh, McDaniels, and then watch out for that Eberflus guy. So it sounds like I probably should have Eberflus at wild card, McDaniels at next guess. Could say that, but I really think McDaniels stays with the Patriots, so I think it's a little bit more of a wild card. Harbaugh could stay with Michigan, but I'm feeling Eberflus with this one. So we'll see. We'll see what happens here. So these are my predictions. Again, as you can tell, I'm kind of for a lot of these, there's kind of two candidates for teams that I'm kind of predicting a little bit, so it's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see, because there's some that are kind of wide open still. A team like the Vikings, so I'm curious to see what teams like that go with. There's 4 teams still playing football right now, so once those teams are done, you start to realize, okay, maybe this guy's a candidate because they're going to interview him now. And maybe guys are playing for jobs. They're trying out right now, and they do better and better, and it increases their probability of getting a job. So things will change here. It gets a little tricky. Things change by the minute. It feels like this, but I've kind of sticked with some. That's what I like here. That I've stuck with kind of the same names for the most part. Maybe it's not just one name for some of these, but the same couple or few names this whole time. So I feel pretty good about my options here for these teams. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section. Your predictions. It'd be pretty cool to see. We're always talking on Twitter. Go ahead and follow that at GoDousNFL. We much appreciate it. Like, subscribe, turn notifications on. Check out all that content we got. Playoff content, off-season content. We got you covered. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.